Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that money has begun flowing to you from places you never expected, not because you worked harder, but because you shifted who you are being. What if wealth begins the moment you occupy the state of already having it? Today we explore why living in the end, the state of your fulfilled desire, causes money to move toward you automatically. When you assume the feeling of wealth as your present reality, life reorganizes itself around that inner truth. Stay with me, because this shift can transform your financial destiny. When you begin to live in the end, you shift from a mindset that chases money to a consciousness that generates it. The end state is not a fantasy or a distant possibility. It is a psychological position that becomes the very cause of the wealth you later experience. Most people try to create financial change by altering external actions while still holding internal beliefs of lack, struggle, or uncertainty. But effort built on a foundation of scarcity produces more scarcity. The outer world cannot contradict the state that dominates within. The moment you assume the end state of financial abundance, you activate a force far greater than effort alone. You establish the cause. Living in the end means adopting the feeling that your financial desire is already fulfilled. This feeling is not passive imagination. It is the emotional signature that communicates with your subconscious. The subconscious is the creative engine of experience, and it responds not to what you want in the future, but to what you accept as true right now. When you feel wealthy before the evidence appears, you impress the subconscious with a new pattern. That impression becomes the organizing principle that shapes your circumstances, guides your behaviors, and draws to you the resources that match your inner conviction. This is why so many people work tirelessly yet never experience the wealth they seek. They operate from the belief that money is scarce, hard to obtain, or outside their current reach. Every action they take carries the vibration of effort rooted in insufficiency. Even when opportunities arise, they often miss them, resist them, or fail to recognize their value because their inner world is not prepared to receive. But when you live from the end, your subconscious begins constructing the conditions required to confirm your assumption. You no longer push against life, you move with the current that your own belief has set into motion. The end state functions like a seed planted in the soil of the subconscious. Once accepted, it grows without strain. You do not need to dig it up to check its progress. You do not force the roots to expand. The seed contains the blueprint for its own expression. In the same way, your assumption of already having money carries within it the structural pattern through which it will manifest. You may not see the unfolding immediately, but the moment the inner acceptance is complete, the outer shift has already begun. Life starts reorganizing silently, weaving together connections, ideas, conversations, and timing, all aligning to the truth you claimed internally. This process does not depend on logic or probability. It depends on your ability to enter and sustain the end state. When you feel the satisfaction of financial abundance now, your subconscious cannot distinguish between imagined fulfillment and lived fulfillment. It sees only a state and must express that state in form. That is why the end creates the cause. The subconscious cannot help but manifest what you faithfully feel to be true. Living in the end also transforms your relationship with action. Instead of acting from desperation or fear, you begin taking steps that naturally correspond with your new identity. You behave as someone who expects success, who expects opportunities, who expects money to circulate through life with ease. This shift in behavior is not forced, it is automatic. You think differently, respond differently, and make decisions that align with abundance because your state of consciousness has changed. The world reflects that shift through favorable outcomes, unexpected resources, intuitive clarity, and increased confidence. This change in state also redirects your attention. When you are rooted in the end, you no longer notice obstacles with the same intensity. You stop interpreting temporary setbacks as signs of failure. Instead, you perceive them as transitions, adjustments, or preparations for what is already yours. Your mental environment becomes calm, grounded, and receptive, allowing the subconscious to continue its work without interference. In this receptive state, you become sensitive to subtle nudges, ideas that surface suddenly, inspiration that feels natural, or decisions that arise with certainty. These impulses are the subconscious guiding you toward the fulfillment of the end you have assumed. As you sustain the feeling of the end state, your emotional atmosphere shifts. You carry a quiet confidence, a sense of inevitability about your financial success. This change in emotion radiates outward, influencing how others interact with you. People who can support your progress appear. Conversations open new pathways. Situations that once felt blocked begin to flow. This is not coincidence. It is the orchestration of a state that has already been accepted. The world mirrors who you are being, not what you are trying to achieve. Ultimately, living in the end means recognizing that your inner acceptance is the starting point of every financial transformation. The moment you feel the desire fulfilled, you create the cause. The path, the opportunities, the ideas, and the resources are simply the effects. What you hold as true becomes the architecture of your experience, and the subconscious faithfully builds it into form. By inhabiting the end before it appears, you claim authority over your financial reality, and money becomes a natural expression of the state you have chosen to live in. Identity is the silent architect behind every financial result you experience. Long before money shows up in your bank account, it is formed in the unseen realm of who you believe yourself to be. When you begin to live in the end, you are not merely imagining a future condition, you are stepping into a new self-concept, and that shift becomes the true catalyst for wealth. The person who is wealthy thinks differently, interprets events differently, and responds to life from a position of internal security rather than fear. When you assume that identity now, you no longer wait for money to give you permission to feel abundant. You generate the feeling first, and the outer world reflects that inner decision. Most people attempt to change their financial life while holding on to an identity shaped by limitation. They try to act confident while feeling unworthy, or they chase opportunities while believing they are unlucky. This mismatch creates friction because the subconscious always expresses the dominant inner state. Living in the end dissolves this conflict. It is the deliberate acceptance that you already are the type of person for whom wealth is natural. You do not struggle to force new behavior. Rather, the behavior emerges organically from the identity you occupy. When you see yourself as naturally prosperous, the decisions you make are aligned with expansion, and the world responds with circumstances that validate that assumption. Identity determines what you allow yourself to receive. If you believe money is difficult, you will unconsciously reject simple avenues for increase. If you believe wealth belongs to others, you will overlook the opportunities standing directly in front of you. But when you inhabit the identity of someone who already lives in abundance, your perception becomes harmonized with prosperity. Instead of seeing obstacles, you see openings. Instead of seeing risk, you see possibility. Instead of seeking rescue, you begin to trust your own inner authority. The wealthy identity is not loud or forceful. It is calm, certain, and self-directed. This certainty becomes a magnet for financial growth. As you stabilize this identity, you find that your emotional reactions transform. Situations that once triggered fear now feel manageable. Bills that once created anxiety no longer define your reality because you are no longer identifying as the person struggling to make ends meet. You are identifying as the one who always has more than enough. That internal position shifts your energetic response to money entirely. You stop operating from urgency and instead move from clarity. And clarity is one of the most powerful states for attracting new income streams, solutions, and aligned opportunities. With a transformed identity, your standards rise. You begin to choose differently. You decline situations that drain you, and you accept situations that expand you. You take actions that reinforce your wealthy self-concept rather than sabotaging it. Conversations shift. Collaborations shift. Even your posture and tone shift. You carry yourself as someone for whom prosperity is normal. This natural embodiment of abundance sends a consistent message to your subconscious, and that consistency reshapes the conditions of your life. Living in the end also removes the desperation that often surrounds financial goals. When you are still identifying with lack, every desire becomes charged with tension. You hope for money because you believe you do not have it. You visualize money while feeling the absence of it. But when you adopt the identity of someone already prosperous, desire becomes a quiet expectation rather than a plea. You no longer attempt to manifest from emptiness. You manifest from fulfillment. Your inner state becomes the evidence, and the external world follows suit. Identity even influences the kinds of ideas you receive. A limited self-concept produces limited thinking, but a prosperous identity opens doors to ideas that would never occur to the version of you that feels constrained. You begin accessing solutions that match the frequency of abundance. These ideas come with a sense of ease, as though they were always waiting for you to rise into the state where they could be perceived. When you act on them, you are acting from alignment, and alignment produces outcomes far greater than force ever could. Income is always the echo of identity because identity is the source. Attempting to change your income without changing your self-concept is like trying to alter a reflection without touching the object that casts it. The outer world cannot override the assumptions held at the core of who you believe yourself to be. But the moment you step into the identity of someone who already experiences financial ease, the reflection must change. It is not optional. The world is compelled to rearrange itself to match the internal truth you have accepted. This is why living in the end is so powerful. It is not fantasy. It is identity alignment. It is the conscious decision to inhabit the self that naturally attracts wealth rather than the self that struggles for it. Once this identity stabilizes, the flow of money feels automatic because it is no longer competing with beliefs of scarcity. The identity becomes the command, the subconscious becomes the executor, and life becomes the mirror. Adopt the identity now and watch your financial world reshape itself in response. The feeling of completion is the quiet inner knowing that what you desire is already yours, and this state carries a transformative power that dissolves resistance at its root. Most people spend their days reinforcing the belief that money is absent, that wealth is something far away, that financial stability will come someday when conditions improve. But this mindset forms a continuous internal argument against the very thing they want. Every thought rooted in lack, every emotional response tied to fear or insufficiency becomes a barrier that the desire must push through. The subconscious mind responds to whatever is most vividly felt, and when the feeling of, "I don't have enough," dominates, it must reproduce circumstances that match that emotional state. The moment you shift into the feeling of completion, the entire dynamic changes. Living in the end is not about forcing positivity or pretending everything is perfect. It is about accepting emotionally and psychologically that the desire is already fulfilled. When you feel financially secure within, before any external evidence appears, you withdraw all the energy you have previously invested in struggle. Instead of wrestling with your circumstances, you occupy the atmosphere of someone who has nothing to fight for. This shift creates a sense of internal ease, and that ease is what removes resistance. Resistance is not some mystical force. It is the tension created when your desire contradicts your dominant emotional state. You say you want more money, but you feel unworthy, anxious, or doubtful. You affirm abundance while living emotionally in fear of bills or uncertainty. This internal split sends mixed signals to the subconscious, and because the subconscious is compelled to mirror the feeling, not the words, it continues to reflect the emotional truth of scarcity. The feeling of completion reconciles this split. It unifies your inner dialogue and your emotional state so that there is no longer conflict between what you want and what you feel. When you adopt the awareness of being financially supported now, Your mind stops grasping, worrying, and questioning. Doubt has no foothold in a fulfilled state. Fear dissolves because the very thing you feared losing or never receiving is now accepted as secure. Scarcity cannot coexist with the calm internal certainty of having. This is why the feeling of completion is magnetic. It clears the mental space through which new ideas, solutions, and opportunities can flow. Your intuition becomes sharper because it is no longer clouded by panic or urgency. Instead of reacting from lack, you respond from clarity. There is a qualitative difference in the way you think, perceive, and act when you feel financially complete. This emotional fulfillment also has a profound impact on your behavior. People often assume that only external changes will improve their financial situation, but most financial breakthroughs emerge from an internal shift that alters how you see yourself. When you feel complete, you naturally make decisions that reflect stability, confidence, and abundance. You follow intuitive nudges that lead toward growth. You adopt choices that align with expansion rather than contraction. The desperation that once led you to cling to unfavorable jobs, underpriced your work, or accept limitations begins to fade. You move with a sense of authority because you are no longer acting as someone trying to become wealthy. You are acting as someone who already is. This state also reorganizes how you interact with the world. You notice opportunities that were previously invisible because your attention is no longer consumed by survival. You speak and carry yourself differently, which alters how others respond to you. Financial openings appear not because they suddenly came into existence, but because your state of being finally allows you to recognize and receive them. The sense of completion does not make you passive, it makes you receptive. It tunes you into the frequency where abundance already exists, and once you are attuned, you cannot help but move toward experiences that match that feeling. There is a quiet confidence that arises when you accept your desire as fulfilled. You stop monitoring time, doubting progress, or questioning whether it will happen. Instead, you adopt the natural behavior of someone who knows their financial well-being is inevitable. This confidence eliminates the subconscious resistance that once slowed everything down. When resistance dissolves, your mind becomes an open channel for inspiration, and the outer world begins to reflect your new inner certainty with surprising speed. The feeling of completion does not wait for evidence, it creates evidence. The moment you stop chasing money as though it is missing, you allow it to flow to you with far less friction. You become a clear vessel for ideas, insights, and movements that align with prosperity. By removing the emotional tension of wanting, worrying, and wondering, you create the psychological environment where wealth can finally enter. The inner experience of completion becomes the foundation upon which financial expansion is built. The subconscious does not analyze, debate, or weigh probabilities. It responds only to the emotional atmosphere you consistently occupy. When you hold the end state of wealth as your living reality, you are not merely imagining a future possibility. You are providing your subconscious with a directive. Emotion is the language it understands, and the feeling of already being wealthy carries a weight far stronger than affirmations spoken without conviction. Once the subconscious accepts this inner state as truth, it begins operating as though your financial abundance is already established, and everything in your outer world begins to shift toward that fulfillment. This acceptance does not happen through force or effort. It emerges through repetition and emotional saturation. Each time you return to the feeling of being financially secure, each time you rest in the sensation that money flows freely to you, you are deepening the imprint. Over time, this emotional state becomes natural and internal home. The subconscious then treats this emotional normalcy as reality, not as aspiration. And the moment it accepts it, your world begins to reorganize in ways you could not consciously orchestrate. Circumstances start reshaping themselves to align with the wealth you have assumed. This is because the subconscious controls far more of your behavior, perception, and decision-making than you consciously realize. When it accepts that you are wealthy, You begin noticing opportunities that were always present but previously invisible. Your mind filters information differently. Instead of focusing on lack, you recognize pathways to growth, income, and expansion. You start acting from confidence rather than fear, from assurance rather than desperation. These subtle inner shifts produce significant changes in your external experience. The subconscious also influences how others respond to you. When you carry yourself with the inner conviction of someone who is financially prosperous, people sense it. Your communication changes. Your energy shifts. You become more decisive, more composed, more solution-oriented. Others begin to view you as someone aligned with success, and because of that, they approach you with opportunities, resources, and collaborations. It is not that you are suddenly luckier. It is that your inner state magnetizes interactions that match your assumed identity. As this inner reality strengthens, you find yourself guided toward actions that are aligned with your financial abundance. These actions might feel intuitive or natural, yet they create results with surprising efficiency. What once required strain now unfolds with ease. You feel compelled to make decisions that support your assumed wealth, and you effortlessly avoid choices that contradict it. The subconscious directs you in a way that aligns your behavior with your belief, ensuring that your outer world mirrors your inner conviction. Even delays and obstacles begin shifting in unexpected ways. Situations that previously seemed stuck suddenly open. People who once hesitated now agree. Projects that appeared stagnant gain new momentum. You may not see the mechanics behind these changes, but you experience their effects. The subconscious is orchestrating a reconfiguration of your life to match the state you have claimed. It influences timing, alignment, opportunities, and even the chance encounters that appear to occur randomly. Nothing is random once the subconscious has accepted your end state. This internal acceptance also changes your emotional responses to challenges. Instead of panicking when an unexpected bill arrives or worrying about temporary financial dips, you remain grounded in the feeling that your wealth is secure. This stability prevents you from reverting to limiting assumptions. The subconscious responds by maintaining the trajectory toward abundance, regardless of temporary fluctuations. Like a compass locked onto a destination, it continues guiding you toward the financial reality you have assumed. Living from the end also dissolves self-sabotaging patterns. Many people unconsciously reject wealth by believing they are not worthy of it, fearing success, or expecting financial struggle. When the subconscious accepts the feeling of already being wealthy, these patterns lose their power. You stop engaging in behaviors that undermine your prosperity. You stop saying yes to situations that drain your energy or finances. You stop making decisions from fear. Instead, you move from clarity, self-worth, and expectation of abundance. As this inner shift solidifies, the bridge of events begins forming, often in ways that appear miraculous. You may receive unexpected financial opportunities, new clients, promotions, business ideas, partnerships, or income streams that you did not consciously plan. People show up at the right moment. Solutions appear before you even ask for them. Resources come from directions you never considered. This is not coincidence. It is the natural consequence of the subconscious fulfilling the reality you have already accepted internally. Your task is not to force outcomes, but to remain loyal to the emotional state of the end. The subconscious does the heavy lifting. When you persist in the feeling of your fulfilled financial state, you create a powerful internal momentum that must express itself outwardly. The world cannot resist the command of a mind that knows its desire is already realized. The more naturally you occupy this state, the faster and more harmoniously your external world organizes itself to match it. In this way, the subconscious becomes the engine of your transformation. It molds your perception, behavior, relationships, opportunities, and circumstances according to the wealth you have accepted as true. By dwelling consistently in the mental and emotional atmosphere of already being wealthy, you give your subconscious the blueprint it needs to construct that reality. It does not fail. It does not doubt. It reflects. And when the reflection finally appears in your external life, it feels inevitable because internally it already was. When you live in the end decision, making shifts from strain to clarity, you no longer evaluate choices from fear, urgency, or the belief that you must scramble to change your circumstances. Instead, you act from the quiet certainty that your desire is already accomplished. This one internal shift reorganizes your entire mental landscape. Your thoughts become ordered, your judgment becomes stable, and your intuition becomes sharper because you are no longer competing with the noise of doubt. When the mind is anchored in the fulfilled state, it naturally gravitates toward choices that support that state. You stop asking, "What should I do to get money?" and begin asking, "What actions align with the person who already has it?" That question alone eliminates confusion and pulls you toward inspired, intelligent decisions. Opportunities that were always present suddenly become visible because you are no longer blinded by scarcity. When you feel financially complete, you interpret the world differently. A conversation that you would have dismissed now reads as a meaningful connection. An idea that once seemed irrelevant now stands out as a doorway. A challenge that used to intimidate you now looks like a strategic invitation. Your awareness expands, and with it, the number of viable pathways increases. This expansion is not forced. It is a natural byproduct of occupying a higher inner state. When your consciousness elevates, perception follows. You begin to operate with a level of discernment that only emerges when the mind is free from the pressure to survive. Inspired decisions feel different from reactive decisions. They carry an inner ease, a sense of flow, even if the action itself requires effort. You do not second-guess yourself in the same way because the decision arises from alignment, rather than from fear of missing out or fear of loss. When you live in the end, you adopt the tone of someone who already embodies success. From that tone, your responses become confident and intentional. You choose deals, collaborations, projects, and directions based on resonance rather than panic. You know that the right choices will unfold at the right time because the outcome is already secure within you. This removes the frantic need to push, manipulate, or control every variable. The person living in the end does not chase money, and because of that, money finds them. Energetically and psychologically, chasing comes from insufficiency. It communicates to your subconscious that you do not yet have what you desire. Acting from desperation reinforces lack, and the world mirrors that back. But when you live in the end, your actions broadcast a completely different message. You behave as someone whose prosperity is unquestionable. That posture alone influences how others perceive you. People trust clarity. They trust confidence. They trust individuals who operate with a sense of stability and purpose. That trust translates into opportunities, support, partnerships, and financial openings that rarely appear for someone radiating uncertainty. Inspired decisions often look simple from the outside, but they carry immense impact because they originate from a deeper intelligence. Logical planning still plays a role, but it is enriched by intuition, timing, and inner guidance that cannot be accessed through reasoning alone. You may feel prompted to reach out to someone, revisit an idea, learn a new skill, or explore an unfamiliar avenue, and although none of these impulses feel forced, they lead to meaningful outcomes. Your intuition becomes a strategic asset, and you learn to trust it because it consistently aligns with your fulfilled state. Each inspired action reinforces the assumption that your desire is real, and that assumption multiplies the effectiveness of every move you make. As you remain in the end, the gap between thought and execution narrows. You do not procrastinate in the same way because hesitation usually stems from doubt. When doubt dissolves, action becomes natural. You follow through more consistently, you communicate with more conviction, and you approach opportunities with a level of confidence that accelerates results. Even setbacks do not carry the same emotional weight because you interpret them through the lens of a guaranteed outcome. You no longer fear temporary obstacles. You simply adjust and continue, knowing that the end is already certain. Living in the end also refines your internal decision-making criteria. You begin to ask higher quality questions. Does this action reflect abundance or fear? Does it match the version of myself who has already achieved the goal? Is this decision aligned with expansion or contraction? These questions guide you toward choices that strengthen your assumption rather than contradict it. Over time, this becomes effortless. You naturally select the path that leads to greater success because your inner state will not allow you to choose anything that undermines it. Inspired decisions carry momentum. One aligned action leads to another. One insight opens the door to the next. You begin to experience flow rather than friction. The world feels more cooperative because your internal world is no longer working against itself. This coherence between thought, feeling, and action creates a powerful magnetism. It draws resources, people, and opportunities into your orbit with minimal strain. The more you act from the end, the more evidence you gather that this state is truly creative, and that evidence strengthens your conviction even further. Ultimately, living in the end transforms your decision, making from a survival mechanism into a creative instrument. You move with purpose, confidence, and intuition. You act not to acquire wealth, but to express the wealth you already feel within. That is the essence of inspired action, and it carries a potency that force could never replicate. When you dwell in the end state, you are not merely imagining a future possibility. You are assuming an inner certainty, a psychological atmosphere that already contains the essence of your fulfilled desire. This inner conviction becomes the point of attraction from which your entire world reorganizes itself. The outer environment is not separate from your inner world. It is a direct reflection of it. As you stabilize yourself in the consciousness of financial abundance, you project a frequency that life must echo back to you. Conditions, people, and events begin shifting in ways that match the state you occupy, often so subtly at first that you only recognize the transformation in hindsight. Living in the end means that internally you no longer identify as someone trying to acquire money. You identify as the person who has already crossed that threshold. And because identity is the most powerful creative force within you, everything in your reality begins to conform to that self-concept. You will find that ideas arise with a clarity and brilliance you did not previously have access to. These ideas are not random. They are the natural expression of the abundant identity you have assumed. They propel you into aligned decisions and actions that produce financial growth. The moment you inhabit a wealth-conscious mindset, you automatically attract thoughts that are consistent with wealth and reject those aligned with scarcity. Daily life begins offering subtle confirmations that your shift is taking effect. People around you respond differently because you carry yourself with a calm financial certainty. Conversations steer toward opportunities, collaborations, and resources that previously never presented themselves. You meet individuals who are positioned to help you, whether intentionally or simply by being in your orbit at the right time. These encounters are not coincidences. They are the reorganization of external conditions, responding to your new internal state. You are no longer operating from force, but from alignment, and alignment draws to you what force could never reach. Financial opportunities begin surfacing from unexpected directions. It may be new clients, promotions, business ideas, investments, creative insights, or a chance meeting that opens a door. When you live in the end, these opportunities do not appear as wishful thinking, but as natural extensions of who you have become. The thought that once seemed improbable now feels ordinary because the consciousness behind it has shifted. You attract what you are prepared to receive. The end state prepares you effortlessly, not by planning, but by being. Challenges that once felt overwhelming dissolve or transform. The reason is simple. Problems cannot remain in the same form when the consciousness that created them has changed. Obstacles lose their power over you because your mindset no longer identifies with lack or limitation. You view challenges from a place of stability rather than fear, and solutions emerge with surprising ease. The environment begins cooperating in ways that were previously unimaginable. Doors that seemed firmly shut start opening. People who once resisted you become supportive. Situations that used to drain you now produce momentum. Breakthrough ideas often arrive in moments of quiet certainty. These insights are the natural byproduct of living in the assumed end. They are expressions of the intelligence within you organizing reality to fulfill your accepted truth. When your inner world aligns with abundance, creative inspiration flows easily because you have removed the emotional and mental friction that blocked it. These ideas may guide you to restructure your finances, expand your business, pursue a new venture, or take a leap you once doubted. Whatever the direction, it will harmonize with your state of embodiment. The most profound shifts occur when you realize that the outer world is no longer intimidating. Instead of reacting to circumstances, you become the one who shapes them. The end state gives you a commanding presence, a quiet assurance that everything is flowing toward your good. This assurance is not arrogance, it is alignment. You no longer chase money or worry about how it will come. Your focus rests on maintaining the inner completion that automatically summons matching conditions. Money follows certainty. It gravitates toward the individual who knows, without contradiction, that abundance is already theirs. As you hold this state consistently, your reality accelerates. The changes become more noticeable, more frequent, and increasingly impossible to ignore. People may comment on your luck, your glow, or your sudden growth. But you will know that none of it is luck. It is the inevitable unfolding of the inner end state you have faithfully occupied. Conditions must comply with the identity you assume. This is the law of alignment. What you embody, you attract. What you expect, you experience. What you accept as true, you eventually live. And as these matching conditions accumulate, they reinforce the state you are living in, creating a powerful feedback loop. Your inner abundance produces outer abundance, and your outer abundance strengthens your inner certainty. You become a magnet for prosperity, not through effort or strain, but through sustained embodiment of the fulfilled conclusion. The end state is not merely visualization. It is the commanding stance from which the entire fabric of your life reorganizes around abundance. When you finally choose to live in the end, something remarkable happens. The mind's constant demand to figure out every step loses its power over you. The obsession with the how the money will come, how the opportunity will appear, how circumstances will change, starts to dissolve. This shift is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about releasing the compulsive need to control every detail. The how belongs to the unfolding of life, not to the limited reasoning of the conscious mind. When you accept the end as already accomplished, you free yourself from the inner conflict that arises when you try to engineer the entire journey. You no longer examine your environment for signs or calculate strategies that contradict your assumption. Instead, you move through life with the quiet certainty that the bridge to your desire is already forming beneath your feet, one step at a time. The mind often fixates on methods because it believes results are produced by predictable, linear actions. Yet the deeper intelligence that orchestrates manifestation does not operate within those constraints. It draws upon countless possibilities, connections, and sequences that the rational mind could never foresee. Trying to dictate the how is like trying to control the wind. It is impossible, and the effort only exhausts you. Living in the end removes this weight. You no longer need to strain or struggle. By assuming the feeling of your desire fulfilled, you allow the creative power of your inner state to determine the route. This is why paths appear that you previously dismissed, and opportunities arise that seem to come from nowhere. The moment you stop micromanaging the process, you create space for the impossible to become possible. When you dwell in the end, your emotional atmosphere begins to stabilize. You stop searching for evidence because the desire no longer feels distant or uncertain. It feels real, it feels present. This emotional completion eliminates the restlessness that makes you look for shortcuts or question whether things are working. The fulfilled state becomes your home, and in that inner home, you stop checking the door every 5 minutes to see if your desire has arrived. Instead, you trust that what you have accepted as true is already moving toward expression. This trust is not passive or naive. It is active alignment. It is choosing moment by moment to remain loyal to the outcome rather than the obstacles. As you maintain this fidelity to the end, you begin to notice that the steps unfold in a manner you could not have choreographed. Ideas enter your mind with clarity and timing. People cross your path at the exact moment you need them. Financial opportunities appear through channels you never planned or imagined. These events are not coincidences, they are the natural consequence of occupying the end state. The fulfilled state influences your perceptions, decisions, and behaviors, guiding you toward the circumstances that match your assumption. You act with confidence rather than desperation, and your calm internal certainty becomes the foundation upon which life builds the sequence of events. Living in the end also protects you from the discouragement that arises when things do not appear to be moving. The rational mind evaluates progress based on visible indicators, and when none are present, doubt sets in. But when you are anchored in the end, you no longer measure progress by external appearances. You understand that the invisible phase is just as essential as the visible one. The seed grows roots long before it breaks through the soil, and the manifestation of money or opportunity follows the same principle. The absence of visible change does not mean inactivity, it means alignment is taking place beneath the surface. When you know the end is assured, you do not panic during the quiet stages. You remain composed, receptive, and steady. The fulfilled state creates coherence within your mind. When you stop worrying about the how, your energy becomes unified. You are no longer torn between desire and doubt, intention and fear, vision and logic. This mental unification strengthens the assumption and accelerates its expression. Conflicted energy slows everything down. A stable inner conviction speeds everything forward. Your decision-making becomes intuitive and precise because you are acting from the version of yourself who already possesses what you desire. You do not force outcomes, you allow them. You do not chase solutions, you attract them. You move as someone who knows that every step is part of the bridge, even if you cannot see its entire length. Another powerful effect of releasing the how is the liberation from time pressure. When people obsess over the method, they usually obsess over timing as well. They want guarantees, deadlines, and proof. Living in the end dissolves this urgency because the desire no longer feels like something that must be acquired in the future. It feels like something that is yours now. And when it feels like yours now, time loses its grip. The impatience, anxiety, and emotional turbulence that once dominated you begin to fade. This calmness invites faster manifestation because you are no longer resisting the natural rhythm of the unfolding. Ultimately, when you inhabit the end, the means respond to you. You do not have to chase the sequence. The sequence reveals itself through intuitive nudges, unexpected events, and effortless alignments. Your task is singular. Remain faithful to the feeling of the end. Let the path assemble itself while you maintain the state of fulfillment. In this alignment, the how becomes irrelevant not because it does not exist, but because it cannot help but reveal itself to the one who already knows the destination is secured. When you settle into the end state with conviction, you shift from hoping for wealth to embodying it, and this embodiment produces a magnetic quality that operates beneath the surface of your everyday awareness. This magnetism is not forced, strategic, or self-conscious. It arises naturally because your inner atmosphere has changed. Instead of projecting need, you project certainty. Instead of grasping for outcomes, you radiate the energy of someone who already possesses them. People sense this difference even if they cannot explain it. They respond to you with more openness, more trust, and more willingness to present opportunities that align with your new identity. You become the kind of person others want to work with, invest in, and support. Not because you are trying to impress them, but because your internal conception of yourself has transformed. This magnetism begins with a fundamental shift in your feeling state. Wealth is not just money, it is a vibration of sufficiency, security, and ease. When your feeling matches that vibration, your behavior, tone, posture, and presence follow. You speak with calm assurance rather than fear. You make decisions from clarity instead of scarcity. You enter conversations with confidence rather than hidden anxiety. These subtle shifts alter the way the world interacts with you. Individuals who previously overlooked you begin to notice you. Situations you believed were unreachable suddenly become accessible. Your environment reshapes itself in response to the inner state you consistently occupy. The magnetic quality of the end state also influences your intuition. When you embody wealth as a present reality, you begin recognizing pathways to abundance that were invisible when you were focused on lack. Ideas rise effortlessly because your mind is no longer clogged with worry. You perceive openings where you once saw barriers. You sense which actions align with your desired outcome and which do not. You feel guided, pulled rather than pushed, toward the steps that increase your financial expansion. This is not luck, this is the natural intelligence of an aligned state, a state that already contains the solution, because it is the end, not the beginning. Another dimension of this magnetism is the dissolving of resistance. When you no longer doubt the arrival of wealth, you stop creating friction against it. You cease second-guessing, overanalyzing, or fighting with circumstances. The moment you accept the end as accomplished within you, a profound ease enters your life. This ease is magnetic because it frees energy that was previously consumed by fear. That released energy becomes available for creativity, focused discernment, and opportunity recognition. Money flows where tension is absent. It circulates naturally toward the individual who is emotionally open, mentally uncluttered, and spiritually aligned with abundance. The magnetic nature of the end state also affects timing in your life. When you embody financial fulfillment, you find yourself in the right conversations at the right moments with the right people. You encounter synchronicities that feel too perfectly aligned to be accidents. A message arrives at the exact time you needed it. Someone offers support before you even ask. A financial avenue reveals itself with uncanny precision. These moment-to-moment alignments occur because your internal state has become the organizing force that shapes your outer circumstances. You are no longer chasing money, you are allowing money to move toward you. In addition, this magnetism alters your expectations in a way that transforms outcomes. When you expect wealth, you unconsciously gravitate toward choices that reinforce that expectation. You invest more boldly. You negotiate with greater authority. You decline opportunities that do not match your standard. You protect your time and energy because you know their value. These actions create a feedback loop. Your expectation of wealth produces wealth, aligned behaviors, which generate wealth, aligned results, which further reinforce the expectation. The loop becomes self-sustaining. Living in the end state also reconditions the stories you tell yourself. You stop narrating struggle, difficulty, or limitation. You begin speaking in terms of possibility, expansion, and achievement. This new internal narrative broadcasts a frequency that the world mirrors back. People who hold limiting beliefs about money fall away, while those who align with your elevated state move closer. Circumstances that once matched your scarcity no longer resonate, and they dissolve from your experience. Your life becomes increasingly populated by opportunities and relationships that support the wealth you embody. Ultimately, the magnetic pull of the end state arises because you are no longer negotiating with reality from a position of lack. You are originating your world from the conviction of fulfillment. Money gravitates to you because you have become the type of person wealth naturally surrounds: someone who knows their value, trusts their path, and remains loyal to the feeling of abundance within. Your state is the signal and money is the response. When the signal is unwavering, the response is inevitable. Living in the end is not pretending. It is choosing the state that generates the results you desire. Occupy the feeling of wealth, hold it as your truth, and allow the world to reorganize itself around that conviction. Money does not come to effort alone, it comes to consciousness. Start living as the one who already has it, and watch what unfolds.